It was a quiet evening in early 1977, not long after Jimmy Carter had taken his place as President of the United States. The air in Washington, D.C. was crisp, the kind of spring night that held a peaceful stillness. Most of the White House staff had gone home, and the hum of the building had faded into silence. President Carter was a man of his word, known for his honesty and his curious mind. During his campaign, he had made a promise. He would look into the mystery of UFOs. It wasn't just idle talk. Years earlier, back in Georgia, he had seen something strange in the night sky himself. A light, silent and steady, moving in ways that no plane could manage. It was a sight he couldn't explain, and it had stayed with him. That night, he was led to a small, windowless room deep beneath the White House. The room was unremarkable except for the heavy door and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. A small table stood at its center, surrounded by plain chairs. On the table was a manila folder, thick with papers, its edges worn from handling. Two men waited for him there. One was a high-ranking military officer, his uniform crisp, his face unreadable. The other was a man in a dark suit. No name, no title, just sharp eyes and a voice that seemed colder than the room. "Mr. President," the officer said as Carter sat down, "what you're about to see is classified well beyond top secret. This is not something we share lightly." Carter nodded, his gaze steady. He had faced crises before. He wasn't easily shaken. But there was something in the air of that room, an unspoken tension that made his chest tighten. The man in the suit spoke next. "You requested to know about unidentified aerial phenomena. What you need to understand, Mr. President, is that this is not the stuff of tabloids or wild speculation. It's real. And it's complicated." The man opened the folder and began to explain. The papers were filled with reports, grainy black and white photographs, and sketches of objects that didn't look like anything Carter had ever seen before. There were eyewitness accounts from pilots, radar data showing impossible speeds and maneuvers, and transcripts of strange signals intercepted from somewhere out in the stars. But then, the man in the suit slid a single photograph across the table. It wasn't like the others. This one was sharp, clear. A metallic craft hovering over a barren stretch of desert, its surface smooth and seamless, reflecting the sky above it. "What is this?" Carter asked, his voice low. The officer hesitated, glancing at the man in the suit, who gave a barely perceptible nod. "It was recovered," the officer said. "In 1947. Carter leaned forward. "Roswell?" The officer nodded. "Yes, sir. And there's more." The folder grew darker as the night went on. Stories of encounters that ended in unexplained disappearances, footage of objects splitting into multiple pieces mid-flight and reforming miles away, and evidence, hard evidence, that some of these objects were not of this earth. By the time they reached the last document, Carter's hands were resting on the table, his knuckles pale. He wasn't a fearful man, but there was something about this knowledge, this truth, that weighed heavier than anything he had ever carried. The man in the suit spoke again. "Mr. President, there's one more thing you need to understand. We don't know what they want. We don't even know if they think like we do. But they've been here a long time, watching." There was a pause, and in that silence, Carter's thoughts raced. He had come into that room expecting answers, but what he found were more questions, and the unsettling realization that some mysteries are bigger than the human mind can grasp. The meeting ended as quietly as it had begun. Carter left the room, the folder locked away behind him, but the weight of what he had learned followed him out. He never spoke publicly about that night. Some say he was warned not to. Others believe he simply realized the world wasn't ready for the truth. Years later, Carter would still carry that memory. The thick air of that room, the cold voice of the man in the suit, and the photograph of the craft, shining like a beacon of the unknown. It was the night he learned that some secrets are best left in the dark. And on quiet nights, when the world was still, he would find himself looking up at the stars, wondering what might be looking back.